All right, Doug, thank you so much for sitting down with me today. Today's topic is infidelity, and you and your wife have been married for several years. And let's start from the point of after a few years of marriage, she came to you and disclosed that she had had an affair.
Yeah, so there was some suspicion throughout when I found out the affair was actually occurring. However, it was denied. And around September of 2019, the affair partner started to sort of become distant, and he was a friend of both of ours, and he stopped answering calls, stopped answering texts, and didn't understand why. And I ruminated, as I do, for a couple weeks as to why this might be, and for some reason I remembered a photo that my wife had sent me of her and him. They had a hotel room. He had been stranded in a snowstorm, and she went up there to help him, which, talking about in retrospect, seems absolutely absurd that you would allow your wife to go do something like that. And the picture of the hotel had two double beds, but it wasn't two different rooms, and it didn't make sense to me at the time. But then I sort of buried it, and it just was like a light bulb that went off, and I was like, what's going on here? This doesn't make any sense. So I asked her, she was getting ready for work. I said, what the hell was going on with and why was there one room with two double beds and not two bedrooms? What was going on with like that? And her her face just like went white, and I knew immediately. I knew immediately that was it. And she sort of just kind of like broke up her speech a little bit and was sort of like weakly denying it, and then it just exploded from there. Um, yeah, it was, and she actually still had to go to work. It was a new job, and so I was sort of left with those thoughts that had occurred. Just auditing the previous years and blowing up her phone, asking questions and just saying horrible things to her, and her immediately being contrite and apologetic, which made no difference to me at the time. I was just in so much rage and so hurt, and yeah. So that was the disclosure day, and that was the worst day of my life by far.
Thank you for sharing that. You've also shared here with me that you didn't know if you were ever going to be able to get through or past that day.
Yeah, and it wasn't just that day, it was the subsequent months. I'd say the first month was the worst time. It went back and forth with some months after that that were really bad, but yeah, I didn't. It was a deep depression and uncertainty, and I didn't know if I would ever come out of it. You just can't believe, and it had a lot to do with the fact that she was so against this sort of thing her whole life. Her father had an affair, and it broke up her and her mother's marriage. And she was always just like, "Oh, cheaters are such pieces of shit," and this and that. And I'm like, this isn't real. Like, she didn't actually do this, right? This isn't. And of course, meanwhile, the affair partner, who was a friend of mine and a former boss of mine, just vanished, become completely unreachable. Um, so I couldn't ask him any questions. Um, yeah, it just felt like a depression that I would never escape from. Luckily, we got in therapy pretty quickly to sort of make sense of some of these things, and use the affairrecovery.com utilities like the boot camp and everything. And I was very lucky in that my wife was so contrite from the beginning, so willing to do anything to make the marriage work and to have me forgive her. She did everything right. And I would say that is not the case a lot of the time. So I had the best conditions possible to overcome this, and it is still hard.
Yeah, I was going to say it's interesting you say you had the best conditions, but you found out about this affair a few years ago and you're still working through it.
Yeah, it's this October 11th will be 4 years to the day of disclosure. And yeah, I mean, I feel like I got to a place where things got better, but I sort of camped out there and stayed there. And this wasn't necessarily on purpose because I don't want to feel this way, but you get sort of stuck in a routine and you don't move beyond it and find true forgiveness. And yeah, yeah.
And during this time, not only did you guys do couples therapy, you also individually did EMDR.
Yeah, we were with a couples therapist, and then she stopped seeing patients during COVID. So then we found another one that would see us during COVID, and she was fantastic. And that's around the time that I started doing EMDR, which was extremely painful and difficult. And ultimately, I don't know if it had any long term benefits. I thought so at the time, but I would come home from the sessions just in horrible mood, and it would last for days, and treating my wife terribly and just like punishing her. And this wasn't on purpose. This is just like a sort of a manifestation of going through these memories again. And some of them, if I would go through this again, I would know not to ask certain specific questions because you can never unlearn that information. It never goes away. And in the wake of this, your first instinct is to ask questions. I want to know how many times this, then, where did this happen? You know, when I was here, where were you? This sort of thing. You think you want to know that stuff, but you don't. If you're in any medical danger, or if there's like a baby that's around that you need to know about, if anything crazy like that, you need to know, but like specific details of instances, you don't want to know. And I wish I didn't know those things. So those were some of the memories that I was going through in EMDR, and it was just rough. And I feel like it almost got me more stuck in the rut of like victimhood. And you know, when it's meant to be therapeutic and cathartic, it didn't help. The couples therapists, both of them, and then now a third one, has been absolutely necessary. I don't think we would have been able to get through it without that. That's for sure.
Where do you feel like you are right now in your journey? You've had couples therapy, you've tried some individual techniques, and like you said, it's coming up on 4 years, right?
Um, Up until the 13th of August, when there was an incident between my wife and I that led to a blow up and a sort of rekindling of these feelings of abandonment and the affair. Um, it sort of led me to finally pick up a book that was recommended to me by the first couples therapist that we saw. It's a book of forgiveness by Desmond Tutu, and because I just had enough. I just, it's not that I didn't have enough before, but I guess I didn't have the impetus to finally pick this up because I was scared, because I was stuck in my position of, you know, sort of power and advantage where I could sort of use this over my wife as some sort of emotional crutch, or if she did anything, whether it be related to the affair or not, I could sort of say, "You remember what you did to me?" So I finally picked this up and I started reading this book, and it absolutely changed my perspective on things. So I'd say up until then, I was backsliding. I'd have periods where I would feel like I made progress. Then we would get into a fight and it would sort of trigger these feelings again, and I would default into victimhood and, punishing her. But I feel like something has changed. Now, that's not to say it's resolved. I just feel like at least the last couple weeks, something has changed in me where there's been a genuine attempt at forgiveness and just a radical acceptance of what has happened, because that was for so long, for years, it's hard for me to accept that this was real. It seems so surreal to me that someone that I trust so much, and then even my friend, would do this to me. Like this, no, this didn't really happen. So I'm just sort of stuck there, and I feel like this book has helped me start to at least accept that there's absolutely nothing I can do about it, and if I want to continue to be married, I have to accept this and accept it as perhaps transformative and, as crazy as it sounds, something that can benefit me moving forward in my marriage, moving forward personally. And I know this sounds almost like Hallmark Cardi, but this is where I've arrived. Um, and I don't even care anymore. This is just for my own mental health, because it was just tearing me apart. Um, so yeah, I'm in a little bit of a different place than I was a couple weeks ago. I know I'm not there yet, not recovered, but yeah, so that's kind of where I am.
And I don't think it sounds too hallmarky. As we know, with trauma, sometimes where most people find their healing path is when they are able to, in a sense, find a reason, a purpose, a cause for what they went through, what happened to them. And also, like you said, that acceptance, finding a way for you to be able to accept that it did happen and it was just a blip, a time in your life, and moving forward with that. And sometimes for people, it can be time. Sometimes it's helping others. Sometimes it's making changes in your own personal life, the growth, the rebirth of something. Um, this is your story and what happened, and obviously you're working through it. But if you could write any ending for yourself, what would that look like?
Um, I don't think it's like a clear end point. It's more like a continued transformation. For me, specifically for me, and the way that my psychology works, it was important for my emotional side of this to catch up with me intellectually. That's always been incongruent my entire life, and this is no different. Um, Intellectually, I was able to understand certain things, why this affair partner may have pursued my wife, perhaps why at this point in time she eventually succumbed to his advances. Not to say that she's a victim or anything, but that's just sort of what happened kind of in the beginning. He tried multiple times, she rejected, and finally, this was the perfect storm. And I can understand intellectually he was hurting. He had suffered a tragedy himself, and, the old cliche, hurt people hurt people. That applies. So it's not an endpoint, it's a continued evolution of catching up with my intellectual side, emotionally. and being able to really feel. And I've always verbalized it this way, like, I understand it, but I don't feel it. If I feel it, for some reason I just can't fake things. So if I feel acceptance, then that's real. I can say, oh, you better accept it. This can be transformative, da 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 da. But if I don't actually feel it, it doesn't work for me. And I've started to feel it for the first time in a really long time. At the beginning, I felt validation from the therapist. Oh my God, this is such a horrible thing. We need to do something about this. Like, I was able to wallow in the victimhood. And I think that's very important at first for a while. Someone to bear witness to your pain, and hopefully your spouse or significant other can also do that. But if you stay there forever, nothing will change. You will stay there forever. And if you don't attempt forgiveness, and I think the idea of forgiveness in the sense that I now understand it, typically people understand it as a sort of permission to continue to do these things, or you're excusing what happened, and that's not at all what it is. The way that I now understand it is it's something for you. It's a radical acceptance and reframing of what happened. Yeah. Sorry, I'm kind of going off.
So, no, with that radical acceptance and forgiveness, have you gotten to the place or to the, let's just say, area of that the affair doesn't define you or your wife?
I can't say for sure because it's only been a couple of weeks that feel like I've really turned a corner, and I'm very hesitant to be like, oh, this is a complete dramatic change, and it's some sort of false epiphany. I feel like time will tell over the next few months if I'm able to sort of maintain this momentum. I'm confident that I will. I just need to stay focused and not sort of default into my patterns of before. Yeah. Yeah.
Where would you like to see yourself mentally, emotionally, in regards to this affair and in regards to your marriage?
I would like to feel the way that I do now, essentially, although, the heft of the affair slightly lessening over time. However, the way that I feel now in terms of the acceptance and my path to forgiveness, it's not 100% realized, but I want to feel this way 6 months, a year, 2 years from now, just a little bit more pronounced, like fully realized. I feel like I'm on my path to that right now. I'm not there yet, and I'm very, wary of anything like that, like a false epiphany, like I've had plenty of times before. Oh, I figured it out, sort of thing. But if I'm just hoping that this is sort of sustainable and this is sort of the new normal. There will be adversity in the future. We will fight. There will be weak moments. My memory of this affair will be jogged. It will hurt. It'll never not hurt at all. But just like any painful moment that you may experience in life, a betrayal, a loss, that pain doesn't completely disappear. But if you can sort of use it, to sort of fortify your life experience, your ability to sort of deal with adversity, then it's worthwhile. But if you just let it, this is what happened to me. I'm an affair survivor, or I don't want to speak for other people who've experienced horrible things, like I'm a rape survivor or sexual abuse survivor. That's for them to discuss. But if you sort of let that define you, it's easy to default in that because you can find a million people who will feel sorry for you. You can find it anywhere. I could go out and share my story and, oh, you poor thing, I can't believe it. Like, I don't, that's one of the reasons why we don't tell anyone. So I don't want I don't want to default to that. I don't want the victimhood forever because you can find it. for anything. You can find people to feel sorry for you forever. And I don't want that going forward. I don't want that for the rest of my life. I don't want that for our marriage. I don't want it to define our marriage. And I feel like there's a unique opportunity here for an increased level of closeness. As strange as that sounds, considering what has occurred, going through shit together with your significant other, whether they caused it or not, has the potential to increase the level of closeness. This is crazy. It sounds crazy, but
It doesn't sound crazy. It makes perfect sense. You guys had a wedge put in between your relationship that many people would just walk away from or explode or implode, and it would be done. Um, but you guys found a way to fight for each other, um, to be with each other through pain and suffering. And I want to point out one thing that I felt like I heard you saying, as far as the victim. It sounds like it was necessary for you to have that time in being the victim, but staying in that role too long has not served you well.
yeah. In the wake of the reveal, I think it's very, very important to have that time. You need to be able to have your time with grief. And if you're lucky, you can have people who will bear witness to your pain, who might be able to help you, perhaps draw on their own life experience to help you. But yeah, staying there indefinitely, you're just going to be stuck there. You're not going to be able to do anything. It's going to impact every single aspect of your life. Like, this doesn't just impact my marriage. This impacts my hobbies, my intellectual pursuits, my job, everything. Absolutely everything. And I just reached this zenith where I just could not take it anymore. I just could not take it anymore. And coincidentally, it sort of happened at the same time that there was an incident. I guess it sort of kickstarted it into me getting the hell out of this situation. So, yeah.
And I mean, I find you to be a very intellectual person, and I think that from just some of our other talks has been a point that I've watched you struggle with, which you mentioned, that having the intellect of something, but the emotional component not matching, being much lower, and having to work through those emotions to catch up to where you are intellectually, what you know logically to be best for you. Um, is there anything that has helped you emotionally work through some of these things or catch up to match you logically?
I think it's important for me specifically to accept the fact that I'm a really emotional person and not shame myself for having a mismatch between my intellect and my emotional stability. And I think that led to some problems. Like, I shouldn't be feeling this. Okay, it's been 18 months. Stop being a fucking pussy. Like, get over this. But I can't. When you sort of deny your reality like that, you're just gonna bury it. You just have to allow yourself that space to feel these certain things and find some sort of effective coping mechanism. You feel it. Like, you can't be sitting around crying all day and go to work, but like, you need to allow yourself the space to feel those things. And ideally, that's from the beginning, you allow yourself proper grieving. And instead of trying to suppress these things, you have to move through it. If you just bury it, it's going to come out in a different way. The whole Irish stiff upper lip thing just doesn't work for me. Perhaps it works for some people. I suspect that it actually doesn't, but I feel like to match myself intellectually, with my emotional side, that may never happen. There will always be some sort of mismatch, and that just has to do with whatever my child development, whatever my psychopathology is. However, if the closer I can get, the more balanced I can feel. I have to allow myself to be myself. Ultimately, I can't pretend. I can't suppress. I can't fake things to myself, because eventually the truth will come out. And yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more with the way you said that, as far as you have to feel your feelings, and that grief and loss is so important in the beginning. And the more and more people try to deny their feelings, or once feelings start coming up, I see it all the time, they run away. It's too much, it's too overwhelming. And sometimes people need several attempts and tries to actually feel their feelings all the way through. But until that happens, very rarely do you come out the other side and work through some of that victim stance and blaming others and kind of stopping your life, pausing your life. You know, when you're actually able to feel your feelings all the way through, I feel like that pause button gets released, and you have a chance to actually move forward.
Yeah, I also think, and while we use others, everyone compares themselves to others. It's it's a little dangerous when you're like, oh well, this person got over whatever in 6 months. I should too. You can't really do that. It kind of it keeps you from fully allowing your emotional process to go through. In the affair recovery process that we use from affairrecovery.com, they were saying, oh, in 24 months, if you do this right, you should be through with this. Well, perhaps if conditions were perfect and everything happened as it was, intended. But yeah, I don't know.
No, everyone's different, and you're right. Some people might recover in 6 months, a year, and once again, it depends on the individual. It depends on the circumstances, and there is no exact time frame for anybody. I think it's more about the steps, feeling your feelings, getting things out, using skills, and once again, even when it comes to therapy or that process, it can look different for everybody. Some things work for some people, and some things don't work for the other people.
Yeah, I think the comparison to other people is just, it's bad for just about everything in life too. I mean, we have like a touchstone for what's normal behavior, what's not normal behavior. Okay, you don't go running down the street ripping people's purses out of their hands. Okay, well that's unacceptable. But like for emotional certain things, if you're working through pain, like you never really know what someone driving down the street or walking down the sidewalk is going through. And they may put on a brave face in public, and privately they're suffering. You never really know. So using what you think you see as a touchstone for, oh, someone's gotten over this quickly. Well, I think you'd be surprised to see people are silently suffering. And if you don't let that emotional process run its course, obviously, like I said, you can't just be like crying all day, every day. Well, you got to change something. But I feel like a complicated situation like this, like, oh, my wife had an affair, and I should get over this. I'm a man. I need some stoicism here. Yeah, that wasn't helpful at all. It's just I suffered because it was uncontrollable at first, but then of course I had to put on a brave face and go back to work, deal with my family, and made it a little harder that we weren't able to tell anyone other than our therapists. Um, but yeah.
Is there, looking back, is there anything during this process, through therapy, through working together as a couple, that you would go back and change or do differently?
Well, as I mentioned before, the detail thing. Yeah, that is huge. It's the first thing you want is details. I want details. If you can resist that urge, as long as you're safe, medically, physically, if everything is safe, do I have to worry about this person, that sort of thing? Don't ask specific, explicit details. Don't do it. Trust me. And you can read about people saying don't do it in all of the affair recovery literature. Don't do it, and then you do it anyway. I cannot reiterate enough. Don't do it. I wish I hadn't done it. There are certain things that I can, I can't take back, and I wish I never knew them. And that's, hopefully those memories are disarmed over time. But I wish I didn't know certain things.
No, that's great advice. Thank you. Before we end, is there anything else that you want to add to sharing the story? Anything that you want to elaborate on or moving forward?
I'm not like a promoter for this literary company, but that book changed everything for me. And it was given to me early on, but I was told, you're probably not ready for this. I wish I had read it within like a year of the disclosure. If you are, whether you're hoping to stay with your significant other or not in the wake of the affair reveal, I think it can help you get your life back. With the acceptance, with the ability to forgive. The examples that they give in the book are real life examples, and they're talking about apartheid and murder and stuff much worse than an affair, at least on the surface. And they were able to forgive in a different sense of the word, truly knowing what that word means. It doesn't excuse anything, it doesn't eliminate, it doesn't permit for more. But I feel like that book should be given to everybody if they, and it doesn't mean they're ready for it, but as long as they have it, and whenever they're ready to get out of that rut, it's really important. I feel like I wish I had read it earlier. Being stuck in a certain stage where you have the advantage, you have the upper hand over your significant other, where you can just default to using the affair as an excuse for everything that's wrong in your relationship. And in another sense, that very well may be true, but that's because you haven't processed it. However, your wife dropped a dish. Oh, it's because of the affair. That sort of thing, like sort of cheapening any interaction and defaulting to that. I feel like true healing from this, it needs to come from at least beginning the process of forgiveness, forgiving yourself, forgiving your significant other, forgiving the affair partner, and not excusing it, but for yourself to transform this experience. So you don't, another cliche that they said in the affair recovery is, pain that's not transformed will be transmitted. So you're just going to continue to hurt other people. Whether you move on from your relationship, you're going to do it to the next person, and just, yeah, honestly, I think just that book and getting into to speak with somebody that you trust, a therapist that you trust, that you can tell these things to, that initially will bear witness to your pain and then will get you on a process to recovery. It doesn't let you sit somewhere for too long after the initial recovery has happened. I think that's important.
It's beautifully said. Can you say the title of that book again?
It's The Book of Forgiveness by Desmond Tutu.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much.